You can learn about finance, financial modeling with your host Matthew Burnett.
Hi everybody and welcome to the Financial Modeling Podcast YouTube channel. With me today I've got Adam West. So Adam is doing freelance consulting and financial modeling in Australia. He's based out of Sydney, Australia. And what we're going to do today is quite cool. We're going to do a 30-minute speed test to see can we build up a financial model in 30 minutes or less. So Adam, over to you. I'm going to set the clock starting. We've got 30 minutes from now. Let's see if we can build one up quickly.
Perfect. So I'll share my screen. Let's start with a blank Excel spreadsheet and go from there. Let's build our P&L, our balance sheet and cash flow, and get a few challenges from you. See how we go from there. Were you ready to rumble?
Excellent.
Let's let's start and take this away. So generally I just set this up. I'll get all my fonts nicely sized so it looks pretty well formatted. We'll start this off as our input sheet. Generally, when I sort of build the models, I sort of take away the grid lines. Sort of find, in terms of just how I've sort of built them in the past, aesthetically it looks a bit nice. Build out my headers. We'll go inputs for here. So what I'm going to do first of all, the first, I guess not really challenge, but one thing that I find with every single financial model is the noise in them. And when you're sort of setting them up is building out those forecast 12-month cash flows for the next 12 months, but being able to change your growth rates and be able to switch them off in time. So what I'll do is I'll set up just a fake example here of a couple of expense categories. So we'll start off with we'll have a revenue up here. And we'll come back to that and put some seasonality in, but we'll go with some expenses, some fixed expenses. We'll start off, we'll say, just high level utilities, rent, and wages. Have some, we've already put wet power, we'll put wages, we'll put rent, we'll put some utilities. And if there's any others, we'll put some oversight government taxes in there. So generally these, what I find is a lot of these expenses just come out year on year. They're pretty consistent, pretty average, but it's good to have some nice growth rates. And because we're building a 5-year financial model, how I'll set this little table up so we can refer back to it. We'll have our years here and we'll pull all our years from this.
So while you're doing this, Adam, I'm going to ask some questions. So my first question to you is, a lot of financial modelers kind of like the cell styles to show, what the difference is between an input cell and output cell, what cells cannot change, etc. Is that something that we're also going to be looking at in this 30-minute speed test, or would we leave that till later when we go and format the model?
We might have a look if we can squeeze it in, but actually, now that you sort of mentioned it, let's just get it all on the front page. Generally, I'd have a cover sheet here where we would have our styles or our format guide. So we'll set it all up. So it's good whenever I do my models, I'll set up. So we've got our input cells. I usually have them a different color, so they're just very obvious. You can sort of see what's going on. Make them a nice light blue, and then we'll put a nice little border around the outside. That style. Different. So we'll get these will be our input cells. And I'll do my link cells. So generally whenever I'm doing this, if I'm linking between sheets, I'll do another color just so we can easily sort of trace through the model. This is coming from this sheet. Or if we have our calculations, I generally keep these as black. And then if we have inconsistent, so it's a good point. Settle these up in the beginning, and that way we can just go and refer back to this when we're building out all our cells. So what I'm doing here, I'm just setting up my growth rates table so I can put all my growth rates in there. And now I set up, because generally what I'll find is, first thing I'll get is I'll get a 12-month budget from the client. Here, and we'll just say our beginning date is.
So what sort of financial model are we looking at building here, Adam? I mean, is this kind of a typical corporate budget type model? Is it a valuation model? Talk us through what sort of model you're busy building.
Yeah, so today we're gonna be building a 3-way for more sort of corporate budgeting purposes, but you can also use it for, I guess, generally I sort of built these in terms of doing a lot of ECM transactions as well. So putting them in place for whenever the investors need to jump in, building a robust little model that they can sort of sit there, play with the drivers and put their own assumptions in for the business to sort of see what the valuation is at the end of the day. So I'll set it up, because generally what I find is that the key things to pull out is what the revenue lines are, what their cost of goods sold is, and then we'll have a look at pulling together what our forecasts are for a lot of the immaterial items. But I found in the past I'd arrive at the immaterial items, and what I'd be spending my time on is getting them all set up so we've got the right sequencing of the cash flows and we've got the right growth rates in. But we're not, then I'm finding my own time is not actually being able to get the time spent on doing the important parts. So driving out what the key drivers of the model are, driving out what the revenue drivers are, picking up what the seasonality is, picking up how the key, I guess, more of the key expenses, the bigger items are driven by sort of revenue. If we're putting in more staff based on if we're going to grow it. So building out the more stringent, like scheduling parts of the model. And I found it's good ways just set this up like a forecasting bit of tool. And that way you can get it for the next 5 years and you can make a lot of the changes. So that's what I sort of arrived at. And I was using, I found it quick and easy to use the dynamic array. So the ones I'm going to use today in terms of doing this is I'm going to be looking at sort of using the filter function. So the filter, not sure if you've sort of had a lot of chance to play around with the new dynamic arrays, but using filter sort and unique, I found it sort of revolutionized, or at least cut down huge amounts of my time when I was going through the data before and making sure I can get all my data lined up and pull out the right data.
So I love that. I think a lot of people watching this video, the array formulas in Excel are relatively new, and a lot of people might not have built financial models using those array formulas. So I think that's awesome. I'm really looking forward to seeing how you're going to incorporate those into the model and how you work them in.
Yeah, and so what I found is actually the way I used to think about problems and way I used to think about modeling problems, it's kind of changed a lot as well. So I went back to the old school when you sat in year 10 math and you were looking at the matrices and arrays, thinking about things in the arrays, you think about a lot of the problems in terms of the matrix elements of them. And it makes it a lot better when you're building more operational aspects of the business. So you're building out, cost of goods schedules and physicals and whatnot. You can do a lot with that in terms of if you've got a fixed capacity of what you're transforming items in, then when you're doing the lookups, I use a lot of the time, think about them in terms of the matrices, and it just makes the problems a lot quicker and easier to solve. So what I've done here is I'll set up. So I've set up a very basic model here, but I've set up our expenses. I'll build out a bit of our revenue assumptions now. So we'll sort of say quantity, price, and seasonality. And I'm going to use the similar format to what I've done here. But the difference is, I guess, and using this format, it's a lot easier, particularly when building these models. If you want to go in and you want to change particular quantities per month, rather than just having a fixed sort of yearly amount, being able to go in and sort of sit there and someone can play with the monthly amounts, and it becomes a lot more useful for operational purposes as well. So when you want to go back into your model and you want to sort of start using it to compare your budgets and actuals, and then we might do
And I think I just want to highlight for people watching the video what you did there. I mean, you went and you put in that 30th of June 20. You linked it though to the cell beneath it for expenses, but then you clearly applied the format there of green text to show anybody working with the model that over there is a link. It links to another cell. So I think that's some great modeling practice there, just to highlight that to the viewers.
Yeah. So generally, and it's good for when someone needs to go through and actually audit this model, figure out what's going on. If they can sit there and say, okay, this one is actually pulling from another cell, we can go through, and more so this is a bit inconsistent as well. So actually, I should have really highlighted it red. But it's really good with it when you're doing it as an inconsistent formula, because then when someone's sitting there and going through and checking it, it's almost like, I'm going to have a look at this. Okay, that's a formula, but this one's actually different. So you want to go through and make sure the logic's correct for that. And particularly if you're changing something in this cell, it just allows anyone that has to pick this up, and at the end of the day, a lot easier of a job to sit there and figure out what I've done as a modeler. And then what I generally do just to make it a bit cleaner is I'll clean up all the mapping cells and make them a light gray, just so they blend into the background a bit. So you know they're there, but your eyes aren't drawn towards them. Now what I'll do here, I'll do a bit of a dodgy, but we can play around with the growth rates in a little bit. I'll use the classic CPI growth rate now for our expenses and our revenues. A neat little trick I'm going to do here, as you can see when I'm bashing around the keyboard, I sort of find I do it a lot quicker if I'm using nothing but the keyboard and not my mouse. One of the key issues is when you're bashing around and you hit the wrong cell, you end up in XFD. So what I always do when I've set out my format, I'll just go and hide these cells. And that way when I'm bouncing around, it stops me and my sheet isn't jumping around every which way.
I love that. And I think that's a great modeling tip, something I do as well. Just hide all the columns to the right that you're not using. Then if you do by mistake go control to the right and you go all the way to the right, you suddenly aren't all the way at the end. You're still within your nice workspace over there. So I think that's a great tip.
Yeah. And then so then even if you need to put in your other columns in the back, you never have to go and unhide them. You can just add in a couple of extra columns there, and then generally do that at the bottom. So what I've set up here, I've set up the base of our model. Now I'll ask you if you've got you want to throw in any challenges here of things that I might have missed for our hypothetical business. So let's sit here and let's say we've just got a hypothetical retail business where we've just got some rent, some utilities, some wages, and some government taxes in there. And then we've got quantities and we've got seasonality involved with it. And then I'll say we've got a fixed percentage. So I won't go into depth here and build us out an inventory schedule and whatnot, but I'll just say our cost of goods are a fixed margin. If there's any challenges you can sort of think of in this business to throw in and we need to model there, otherwise we'll go away and we'll build our three-way aspects of this. And I can sort of talk about as we go through how we'll sort of convert this into a model. And maybe it might be easier rather than doing different sheets. I might do it all on the same sheet so we can refer back to what cells I'm using and whatnot.
So let's do that. Obviously, I think a lot of people watching would know that generally correct or accepted modeling practice would separate out your input sheet, your calculation sheet, and your output sheet. However, for this demonstration purpose, let's include them all in one sheet. And then obviously, we could always go and separate it out into different worksheets at a later point in time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just going to be a lot easier for us to explain what's going on between jumping between sheets and whatnot. And generally, what I'll do when I first set up these models is I'll set up all my links. So I have a contents page here and it'll link back to a content, so you can easily bounce around whatever sheets you're looking at as well, which is always what I found a sort of healthy little trick. So what I've done is I've set up the basis of our P&L, and as we move through, we can throw in some tips and tricks when we get to our balance sheet and whatnot. But for this one, let's just have a look at it. We'll have a look at bi-monthly. I guess the thing what we'll do here is, because we'll keep it on the same sheet, I'll build out our P&L, and we'll just do it on a monthly basis, and we'll do it by month for the next 5 years.
So we fixed inconsistent. So inconsistent formulas, a slight typo there, but we can always go and fix typos at a later stage. So let's get going into the P&L.
Yeah, let's jump in. So first things first, let's set up dates. Now, it's kind of, I guess I probably don't do what the standard is, how we'll sit there and we'll do, what I'll do here is I'll chuck in our year. But I kind of don't do, I guess, the standard where you do your opening date and your closing date. And the reason why I do that is I've just done it a bit neater and cleaner. And then I sort of, if I'm ever looking at something that's in between a month, I'll just base it on the end of month and utilize the sort of date formulas in Excel, which are quite useful. And then just reformatting. And a neat little trick, I guess, for any of your viewers there, how I get this neat little formatting and what we might actually do. Build our model here. So what I do in terms of the formatting of these cells is whenever you've got a date, if you want to change date, so if you pick 3rd of the 7th, 20, and you want to change it to that nice 30th of June, it's just Control-Shift-3, and then it just makes a really nice little date formula. So that's a handy little quick tip. I'll pump in the end of months here. Put a nice little if this equals, and then one thing we haven't done up here, financial end. Just so if we were to go and do summary financials based on year, we know we're summarizing the correct year. So we'll say we've got a 30 June year. And I'll just go if that equals month. What our financial year end is up here. Anchor this cell. Then we'll just say whatever our year is +1. And if not, we'll say it's our year. Go through. So I anchored the wrong cell there. So we're actually going to look at if this month, anchor this, and let's go back to what our financial year end is. Hang this across so we can get all our years in place.
So just for anybody that's not aware, a couple of kind of keyboard shortcuts you're using there, and I think you're 100% correct, right? Fastest way to build financial models, fastest way to use Excel is kind of throw your mouse away and use your keyboard. Just, copying the formulas to the right, Control Shift R, to select the cells, and then Control R to get the formulas across. So a couple of keyboard shortcuts using there, and I think really useful stuff if you want to build a model quickly, and essential if we're time limiting it like we are to this 30 minutes.
Yeah, when we're sort of limited ourselves. So I guess that's the thing. And when you set your spreadsheet up, all right, and you're not bouncing off of it in XFD here, it's a lot quicker to just go through and build your model. And then we can get the right number of cells here so we can set it up so we can get the rest of the financial year. There we go. So we've got ourselves 5 financial years. Last thing we'll do is we'll just earn this cell. And we'll start our beginning model date to the 1st of 7th, 20. Update that to our EOM. There we go. So we've got our P&L ready to go now. So let's start off with the first item. We'll go with our revenue calculations. And I might just draw out how we'll calculate our revenue. Generally, I've found, depending who you're building for as well, if you've got a client that's pretty Excel savvy, you can just build it all into one formula. But it's always good and best practice, so I sort of find, to set out what we're doing for our calculations. So what we might do is, because I've set up, I'll show the first bit of the formula, because what I've done here is I've set up a table so we can actually change what our pricing is per month. We can change what our seasonality is. So I'll put a seasonality percentage in there. And we can also change what our quantity is for the revenue. Without the growth rate seasonality, because that's not a thing. But what we'll do here is I'm going to filter and use the growth rates that I've used on the side. So instead of having straight line growth, I'm just going to pull down the basics of calculating the growth rate, 1 plus the growth rate, and times it all together using the product function, and use the filter to be able to pull out what year specifically we're looking at. So that way we can actually build, in terms of the model, we can build a pretty robust model, even though it's just a forecast. We can sit there and we can change our growth rates. We can even take out an expense for a year or take it out for the rest of the time if we need to, based on a certain year in a very, very easy way. So in terms of our revenue, I'll set up a price here and we'll say, our trinkets will sell for $10 each, and sell it across, and we'll say because it's Christmas time, we can sell them for $15. So we'll have a different one there. And then the other thing I'll do here is I'll set this up so that this is our first year, and then this is going to be our growth rates to figure out the rest of the year. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to build the same seasonality into the entire model. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to go plus X lookup.
It's a great formula there, X lookup, one of the newest formulas in Excel, and it's a really fantastic formula. Just for anybody that's not aware of, that it hadn't seen that X lookup formula before, it's a really great formula.
It is. It's great. It saves a lot of time. It's got some good functionality in there as well, in terms of when you're looking at wildcard matches and when you're looking at, particularly if you want to search last to first, even though you can sort of do similar things in the past. And it's a lot quicker. I sort of found I was always using index matches in the past, just typing in X lookup, it saves a whole lot of time. So what I'm going to...
100%. And I think just to highlight to the people watching the video as well, if you've ever used an index match to get around the fact that VLOOKUP can only look up to the right, XLOOKUP solves your problems for you.
Yeah, exactly. XLOOKUP will look left to right and right to left. And you're not going to sit there and have to have offset formulas and whatnot, and have to have address formulas to figure out what actual row you want to look up if you want to look up multi-set data points. So what I'm going to do for the first bit of our formula here is I'm looking up what month we're in. We're going to have a look. Then it's going to pull what our price is for the month. And the second part of the pricing is we're going to look at what the growth rate is. So what I do for this is I'm going to use the product function, and then I'm going to filter I'm going to go 1 plus, using the new dynamic arrays, 1 plus our filter, and we're going to filter our array here, and I'll switch these labels here in a minute, and we'll take this as our price, but I'm going to filter our growth rates array here, and then I'm going to include it if this is less than or equals to what our current year is. So by doing this, we're actually only going to pick up, it's going to use the new dynamic arrays, and it's going to pick up what we're picking up. So for this one here, if we're looking at sort of 2022, we're going to pick up 1.84, 1.84. Then with that array, it's going to add 1 plus to each of the numbers there, and then we're going to be able to look at the product for that. So I'll give a quick little demonstration. And the reason why we get the error is because we don't have a 2020 in there. So I'll just throw a little if error in there. So what this does, and I'll just pull this formula out so I can sort of show to your viewers what we're doing here. We'll go through and we'll have a look at 2021. So what we want to be doing, and what I want to pick up just here, lock these cells away, is what we're doing is it's going to pick up 1.084, and then with that product function, as I drag this across, so we get to 2022, what it's going to look at is it's going to look at 1.84%, and then we're going to times it together so we can get what the growth rate is going forward. So then if I just look at that, times that, we've got 1.37, and what that allows me to do is then, depending on whatever product we're looking at, set these labels. here. But whatever product we're looking at or whatever item we're looking at, we can actually dynamically just adjust our growth rate. So I could go 5% this year, 6% this year. And what this function is going to do is going to be able to pick up that little intricacy in there. So then we can grow out our cash flows while keeping the same sort of cash flow timeline as well, or while we're keeping the same underlying timeline. So we can grow it and we can keep the timeline. And it's just a sort of neat formula or a neat way of doing this.
I really like that. That's yeah, it's a nice way of just building up a little bit of an index over there. So you got the price index going forward, using the product and filter formulas. That definitely, you know, they're pretty new formulas, so not everybody has necessarily played with them before.
Played with them, and they're really useful because what I found by doing these arrays is it allows you to do a lot of your math that you're doing to an entire array. So if I sit there and I'm just picking up a filter, for instance, I'm filtering out just whatever it is for 2021. If I'm looking at 2022, it's picking up both those growth rates, and then using the new dynamic arrays, you can actually basically build that into a function. So I can go and +1 to both of mine. So it just allows you to play around with the arrays a lot quicker and a lot easier, and it saves a lot of time rather than setting out in the past that I have to set out multiple data tables doing my calculations. By being able to truncating that all into one formula saves a lot of time. And then even if you're using data where you're using horizontal arrays and you're turning them to vertical, using transpose, it saves a lot of time. And you can start that's what I was sort of getting at the start. You can start thinking about things in terms of the matrixy element. So then from here, let's look at our price. Let's look at our quantity. Now I'm going to just drag this formula across down the page. So I'm going to unlock all my cells. In terms of these. And this is just going to allow me to adopt the formula going down the page as well. So now if we look at what our quantity is, we're obviously going to have 0 in here, but let's just chuck in for argument's sake, 10, 10, 10. The other thing we'll fix up here is I put 0 for if error, but we'll just put it as 1. And then build that across. So that way now we've got our price and our quantity for our revenue. So we can just total our revenue, sum this.
Multiply rather.
Yeah, multiply. Had my mind set that there were 2 revenue items. So we'll do that as well. And there we go. So we've got our revenue lines open, and it's pretty dynamic now. So I mean, when we sit there and go back and play, not only have we picked up our sort of seasonal aspects of it, which we'll actually add in for our quantity, we'll add in a bit of seasonality there as well. But we've also added in, we can mess with the growth rates here. So we can have different growth rates in different years, or if say we just want to cut out the price, but we'll do this for these expenses down here. If we want to cut it out at a certain year, we'll just zero out the growth rates, or we'll just do a negative 100%, and that's going to cut out the expensing going forward. So we can cut out our costs as well quite easily.
Hi everyone and welcome back. Adam and I had to take a brief hiatus, a couple of little family emergencies along the way. But we're back now, jumping straight into the model. So just to refresh your memories, what we're doing here is we're building a model, and this is sort of a speed challenge. So Adam has said, he thinks he can build a model using all the latest Excel functionality. And of course, there's some really cool Excel formulas thrown in here as well, in sort of 40 minutes or less. And that's what we're busy doing. And I think we're on track for time, right, Adam? Do you want to give us a quick recap of where we are and where we got to?
Yeah, definitely. So we've sort of set up our model. We put all our input drivers in and we started building out our P&L. And the next bits is really finishing the P&L build out the balance sheet, build out the cash flow statement, and then tie it all together and build the summary in. I think we can make it in 40 minutes. We'll have to really bring out the new formulas, touch the dynamic arrays here, but I think we can do it.
Awesome. So let's go. And just to remind everybody as well, I mean, you've applied some nice conditional formatting here. So all the gray cells are kind of your input cells over here, and then obviously and then these cells where you are on the P&L, these are all the sort of calculation formulas.
Yeah, so we're running these are all the calculations, and just a bit of a recap. What we actually did was we set up our tables last time. So what we're effectively doing is we're doing a lookup. We're pulling out what our price is based on what the month is, and then we're applying whatever our growth factor is. So we can dynamically adjust our growth factor going out 5 years. So you don't have to have a stable, 3% for the rest of your model. You can actually dynamically adjust that if you're looking at a business that sort of has that exponential growth or even a sort of flatlining growth. And even if you need to cut off costs. So we've set that up. The next we'll do is we'll set that up for our expenses. I think where we're at last time is we've set up our price, our quantity, and now I'm moving on to the expenses here. So we might continue using the same methodology there. Build out the expenses. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to show off some of the new functionality in here because this is really useful. I've started using this a lot of the models that I'll be building is when you're getting all your account codes, you run them off. So you're pulling off your chart of accounts or whatnot. You pull your unique. And so what this is doing is this is looking up the array and just pulling out the unique characters out of here or unique words or whatnot. And that way, if you're going through and particularly if you're running lookups and you're pulling data into your spreadsheet, you're not having to go through individually set up all your chart of accounts and think, oh, wait, we've got 2 salaries, we've got 2 wages. Very simple way. And you can even then apply a sort function to that. So we can alphabetize our, we can just go ahead and alphabetize our expenses here. So now what I'm going to do a little sneaky because I've already sort of set up our formula before.
So while you're doing that, I'll just comment and don't stop while I explain background. But yeah, for anybody watching that's used to the old array formulas, you had to kind of press Control-Shift-Enter and squiggly brackets appear around your formula and there's this whole palaver. Now, it's beautiful. The array formulas now you just press Enter and it automatically fills the other cells with the outputs. So really cool that Excel have now updated that and of course incredibly useful.
What I'm going to do here, Matthew, is I'm just going to put in some rand formulas. So we're just getting a random data set in here rather than going through and building out. There we go. We've got a bit of a data set that we can go. We might pull out some of these expenses and just say, this one here, we'll only do yearly. This one here, we'll do, every quarter. And just give us a nice sort of cash flow sprawl there. I haven't set up my square brackets, my nice formulas there, but that's all right, we'll run with it. And there we go. So we've just quickly built out our P&L and it's a bit of a sense check. Let's go through and have a look. So we've got our government tax. The other thing we might want to do here is because we've actually ordered this based on that, we'll go through and we'll filter. So when we do the X lookup, based on, or just make this a bit quicker, we won't go through and sort our data here. We'll just use unique. But what I'd do if we weren't so time pressed, I'd set this up. So I'd set a filter up in this cell here. So we look at the entire, so rather than doing an X match here, I'd opt to sort of do a filter and filter out the entire array based on what we're looking at here. And then you just simply set up a filter formula on the overall lookup there. So we've got our lookup based on the months here. I'd set the filter up. So initially we'd filter this data set and would include if, just set this one up. And then I'd include if that is equal to that. And what that's going to do is that's going to pull out the array there. And so I'd apply that array, then bringing that into there. So we could actually even just put that in here. Just give you a bit of demonstration here. So where we've got this array here, I'd replace that with a filter formula there. And what that's done is looked up our table over here, anchor all my points in here, and anchor that there. And then that's going to go through and dynamically adjust. So this way, what we can actually do here is now we can apply our sort filter that we originally had, bring that in. And as you can see, it just dynamically adjusts that. So if we look here, government taxes, we've got 97555. I'll just do a quick sense check, pull out for other expenses. These guys here for a year. Oh, but what it's done there, we've got our growth in here. So there we go. So we've got the exact matches there. We went through and filtered and we've dynamically adjusted there. So that's pretty useful, particularly if you're pulling in from Xero or a chart of account or whatnot, and you've got multiple entities and you're pulling in multiple sort of charts of accounts that all have the same names and salaries, and you just want to consolidate into one neat line. Pull it through, you pull through your monthly cash flow then you can apply your growth formulas here to grow it at different dynamic amounts. And 9.2, we go through the model and just quick sense check it, go right to the back. And we have where we started our model, 9.7. So we've constantly grown that from July. So we've set that up. Let's put our EBITDA in. Format this. I'll leave DNA. If we get time, what I'll do is I'll show you how I quickly set up a nice little DNA schedule so we can implement putting in what the assets we currently have and then building out a bit of a sort of schedule, depending if we get the time there. Got our EBIT. And finally, we'll take our tax off this to get to our MPBT by our interest. We might throw in a bit of debt into the model as well. Net profits before tax. Put our tax in, and then NPAT. Now that we've got our NPAT set up, we'll go back and if we get time,
Just lock down. Don't forget to lock down that formula for tax.
Oh yeah, there we go. We nearly got tripped up there. Not pulling in any tax into the model. Cool. So we've set that up. Let's move down and get our balance sheet set up, and then pull through our cash flow. Matthew, have you got any challenges you're looking to throw into the mix here, or we'll wait till the end?
I think that we can wait for the end and maybe have a couple of follow-up challenge sections, and maybe even put it out to the audience to see what else they would like us to build in, and how quickly we can do it. But I think this is a great showcase of the new dynamic array formulas. I think it's you're really illustrating the power of the more XLOOKUP, sort, unique. And I think the ability to input those into a financial model is not always that clear, and certainly this video is doing that
Yeah.
for the people watching.
And I think the thing I really find with them as well, the speed. So rather than previously, if I'm looking up something, I'd either be sitting there doing an an index match. If I'm looking up a table, now I'm using just an XLOOKUP, which is just a one formula. Or even what I've found useful as well, thinking about problems, and I did it in another video, was when you want to look up multiple criteria. So if you're sitting there and say you've got an array of data here, we'll say this is the season. If it's 7, it's winter, summer. Then you've got your dates, and then obviously you've got 2 others. What I used to do is you'd build out a sum product, which is obviously, you probably know when you build sum products into your sheets, they drain all the power out of there. You're getting massive spreadsheets then, and it's taking ages to calculate. What I ended up and started doing is building in filters and XLOOKUPs in there. Cut down quite a lot of the actual calculation time, and made the actual spreadsheet a lot quicker as well. What I found, and we didn't have such a large file size doing that either. So just continue this. We'll just go. I'm just going to build out our balance sheet here. We'll just build out a very basic balance sheet. We'll just go accounts receivable. We'll go some tax payable. And any fixed assets that we put in there. I won't split it between current and non-current assets just for the time being, and we'll put some liabilities in there. Generally in Australia, I'm not sure how it is in South Africa if you've got sales tax there. We will have goods and services tax. So one thing to be mindful, particularly in a lot of the models I'll be building, is you've got a 10% on your revenue line, and you've got a 10% on your expenses line. That every quarter you've got to pay out to the government. So keeping track of that, and it actually has, depending on the type of business you got and depending on the life cycle, you've got quite a big swing in there for the cash.
Yeah, definitely. In especially we see this in infrastructure finance models where people can take into account VAT on purchases and sales, and obviously companies would pay out VAT on asset or value added tax, and actually be able to claim that back from government. But that does mean a big working capital swing in the models, and you'll even have certain banks who will actually fund a tax or VAT facility specifically to pay for VAT on goods, knowing that it's going to be a short-term facility. Once government refunds the VAT, that facility can be repaid.
Yeah, well, exactly that. And the other one, big one being R&D tax. So what I might do in here, I'll throw in a bit of curveball, and I'll put an R&D tax payable in there. And we have in Australia, so you have a lot of banks and financial institutions actually fund the R&D tax incentive, because you'll get paid that out a year for all your expenses that you spend that fall within that R&D tax bracket. And it's about 43.5 cents on the dollar you'll get back. So quite a lot of early stage companies over here will use this incentive to obviously fund their operations, and shareholders dilution in the early stages isn't as diluted as otherwise would be.
So while you said early stage companies and startups, I think that's great that you actually highlight that, because I think a lot of startups and early stage companies don't build financial models for their businesses because they think it's so complicated. But what you're showing here is that actually we can build one pretty quickly. We can build one pretty easily, quickly, and in less than an hour, you can actually build a financial model for your business. Obviously, the hard bit is this is the part where businesses have to do a lot of thought, is obviously the assumptions that go into their financial models. But in terms of building out their financial model, I think this video shows that a lot of startups and small businesses and small business owners can do one pretty quickly. Even people thinking about starting up a business can build one pretty quickly to understand the viability and the sustainability of their business.
Yeah, and even We might just make this model that we're sort of building on this video. If anyone wants to download it, we might just make it free for someone to sort of pick up along the way, and just shows that once you set up your basic cash flow, it's not very hard to actually set up a cash flow that runs through, and then you can start thinking about, you know, if we're going to build our more assumptions around our price and our quantity, our revenues, or if anything here, building our wages schedule. But it's not particularly difficult to actually just sit there, think about it, logically build it out, and then someone else pick it up and go. Chuck all this in. You know what I've done? I've made a little boo-boo here. So we're running our model starting over here, and I've put all our line items over here, so we'd have a big gap. So I'm just moving them across. Now we can run our cash flow statement. Remove these borders. Okay, well, let's set this up. Let's go. So we're going to set up our cash flow statement first as the first line item of our balance sheet, and then we're going to fill in all the rest and then set up our check formulas in here. So we'll just run out our opening cash. We're just going to set up our sum formulas, and as I go, I'll sort of talk through how we're going to calculate each of our items along the way. We'll go net interest, and then we'll go draw repayment. Cash flow from our financing activities. So we've split our cash flow, as you can probably see, just the usual cash flow statement set out. We've got our finance activities, we've got our operating activities, and then we'll have our investing activities down here. Set this up.
So obviously, I mean, most of the work comes in set up a model, finding all the inputs, and we're still taking that into account. Yeah. So I guess we'd be heading on for the 40 minutes. Yeah. But I mean, you've got a significant base of the financial model already set up. And of course, doing the formulas, which you're going to do now, is simply a matter of pulling from the inputs and escalating over time.
Well, exactly that. And I think the key thing, if we can leave anyone with anything, is just running your checks through your model as well. So the first check you're just going to want to run is if that equals being our total equity equals our net assets. And things like this, you'd be surprised. You pick up models and they just haven't got these simple checks running through. Or they do, but they're just not balancing. And like just a key fundamental thing, if you bring it all back to the accounting principles, you know, fundamentally what you've set up, all the calculations are working, and then you've got to go back through your inputs and go back through the actual mechanisms to make sure you picked up reality. But as a first front, making sure you've got your three-way model balancing is, I think, is one of the key things. And what I'll show everyone today as well, actually, with doing these checks, is just setting them up with conditional formatting. So you've got your true here. A lot of the time, if I just go up here and I'll go format cells that are equal to true. And the reason why I like to do true, or generally 0 or 1, is it's very easy for Excel to pick up. And then we're just going to fill it with a nice green color. And we'll do the same with the font. And then we've got a nice little green light, and we'll do the same if we get a false. And this way, I'll just show you how I set up my cheat checks as well from this. Because it's very easy then doing just with the conditional formatting, setting it all up. And then if we we run that out for the duration of our model. Generally at the start of the model, I'll freeze all the top panes. And just run the sheet check and the master check up here. So tying back to, generally I'll have a cover sheet that's set up, very easy to set up, and you just have your and formula. Just copy our little formatting that we got here using the formatting painting tool. Saves my life. But then if we go through and say, for instance, here we'll put 5 equity, then the whole sheet's going to be out. We know we've got a problem in our balance sheet, and then we can set up the same. So generally then I'll set up for the working capital where I'm calculating, particularly for a debt schedule, where I'm calculating the net cash in itself and the debt schedule to be able to arrive at what we're drawing down or what we're repaying in the model. I'll set up another check to make sure that the cash in the debt schedule equal the cash in our cash flow statement, so that whenever we're sort of calculating the same line items throughout the model, we're just making sure that they're equal throughout the model, and we're not having different calculations throughout there. I'll just go through and we'll just finishing off all the three-way elements. But this is what I find sort of this is the best practice. I sort of find putting in the model as well. Now, one thing I forgot to put up here, but we'll put up here. We'll do our tax payment month. Say, for instance, our tax will get paid out on the 6th month every year. We'll just run through here, tax payable plus if month 6, then we're going to pay out, we're going to go 0, and if not, we're going to go that plus that. Get our little error because we've got to run through this plus equals that. There we go. That plus whatever our tax is in the current month.
So this model at this point in time is looking pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, so we've nearly built
obviously, what would you say is the first step for somebody who's running their own business, starting their own business, maybe doesn't have a financial model, to get going in terms of building a financial model? Would you say it's to download a template like this, like you said, we're going to make available to people? Or is the first step to rather go and see, like, what are the actual assumptions? You know, what are they going to input into the financial model? How would you recommend a small business owner start building their own financial model for their business?
I would recommend not focusing so much on the P&L and cash flow. Oh, sorry, the balance sheet and the cash flow elements. Focus on the P&L. That's going to drive ultimately the cash. Then be it downloading template or trying to build out this sort of obviously the three-way elements and cash statements, but at least because I guess being a small business owner, if you're sitting there and thinking about what's driving the profit and the revenue in your business, you start unpicking the drivers, and that's going to, I guess, help you look at your business in a different lens, looking in that strategy lens and start picking out and thinking, my revenue is actually driven by my staff. Now, do I need to think of another way to, approach this? Because that's like obviously a lot of operational leverage in my business now. Maybe I look at having casual staff. So you start by unpicking your drivers in your business. You can start unpicking, I guess, your strategy and your pain points in the business as well. And then going through that, that's, I guess, my personal view on how I'd sort of recommend tackling it. But I guess, if you have any other thoughts as well, Matthew.
Yeah, great. I think while you wrap up the model, I think you're right. And I think as a small business, the only thing is also not to be too caught up in the accounting, but to focus on cash. Because at the end of the day, you can have profit sitting in your profit sitting on your financial model. But if that money is not sitting in your bank account, you're not going to be able to pay your staff and pay suppliers. So focus on your cash. And I mean, like you, Adam, I would say even for a small business owner, don't even worry about a balance sheet at all for the moment. Just focus on cash flow into your business. Like, what does your cash flow actually look like? And that will also help you identify funding shortfalls and the need for working capital. And of course, for a small business, cash is king.
Yeah, well, exactly. You sort of wrap up, because I guess getting into these elements here, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out why I've got a check formula in here. It looks like our numbers are spot on there. But not to worry. But yeah, I think that's probably the key takeaway in all of this as well, is cash is king, and focusing on your cash flow rather than the accrual elements and getting into the level of complexity. Because I guess the complexity comes when you start wanting to evaluate new projects and you start wanting to look at the whole picture. But as a start, getting a base cash flow forecast going and then building on that as you go through time and setting up the elements as you go, but also keeping in the back of your mind the right way to structure it, that someone else can come in and pick it up. Because the worst thing is if you're going to go build a forecast, you've got key man risk there that nobody else is going to be able to decode what's going on, or it's going to take them a long time. So keeping in the back of your mind, someone's going to have to pick it up, setting out what your inputs, your assumptions are, setting it out so it's a logical way to follow, as I think is the best way to approach it there.
Absolutely. So while you're wrapping up the model and bringing this to a close, I mean, unfortunately, we've got 3 checks there, and this is the beauty of Excel and the beauty of financial modeling, actually, where it looks like your numbers are correct, and it might be a cent that's out or something like that, or even a millicent, microcent that's out. But that's the beauty, yeah. And there we can see that it starts in the absolute decimals that starts not balancing. And this is why, and I don't think any financial modeler would be ashamed of this, and I can see you doing it there, is putting in a round formula over there, because obviously as in finance anyway, we're not counting the decimals of cents. If your model balances to the cent, I think that's pretty good enough. And there we can see the model now balances.
And now we can even throw in a few like little tricky elements. Let's throw in a bit of working capital as well. Obviously, one of the key things for any business is calculating,
absolutely,
your net working capital. And let's say for this business, let's have our days sales outstanding.
And I think this is key, and I think this is a great element to add in here to end of the model, is the working capital. Because as any small business, probably one of the first financial facilities you're going to require is a working capital facility.
Well, exactly. It doesn't cost you anything. And the way, I guess, a better managed sort of working capital facility, if you can reduce your sales terms. So let's say for this business, let's go 15 days. And for this one, let's go 45 days we pay our suppliers. And I guess the other thing I should have done that was the best practice here, Matthew, is setting up what our unit counts are. So what are the units we're looking at for each of these? But if you sort of just go through these, and we'll put them in days. And now we'll run over here a little calculation just to put this in the model. We'll go 1 divided by times 365. 5. Way around. times 365 minus 1 to get our percentage. I think I think the late night hours is getting to me now, Matthew. Here we go.
Yeah, we can cut this bit out of the video.
Yeah. So let's just run it. I've got it set up now. So we'll run. So we're running 4% on our revenue, working capital facility, and then let's go. We didn't even put in payable here. I will just go 12% on all our expenses. And then maybe we can do a sensitivity to show a business owner, I guess, the importance of working capital on your business. So what I've done is I pulled in the working capital here. Now let's have a look what the cash flow is. So just running on a 15-day sales outstanding, if we have a look at the end of our year, so we go to 30 June, our cash balance is 723. Say we just remove and we take everything in cash and we're just paying our vendors all the way out, 727. So instantly the business is sort of pushing out what they're paying their vendors. We've got growing expenses, but we're retaining all our cash. So we've got the importance of the working capital in there. And just one for, I guess, small business and quite easy to set up. Now that you've set the model up, what I'm going to run down here very quickly is just an R&D calculation. And because I think this is particularly important for the businesses in the startup space, is being able to run a little sensitivity on the side of your model. So after you've built your model, you can then build, I guess, additional bits. Generally, I'd sort of build another column in there, but we'll just run it off the side here. What we're going to do is we're going to just set up a few rows here. Bring it for all key bits.
What would this R&D calculation look at?
So this is going to look at the expenditure. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply, basically what we're going to do is we're going to look at what the expenditure is, have a look at how much of it can be applied to your R&D tax, and then apply an R&D rebate to that, to sit there and see what cash can we expect to get back in the business by going out and spending, I guess, spending the expenditure here. So generally in Australia, what we've got is we've got 43.5 cents that you can get on applicable expenditure. So say I'm running, a tech startup here, and my software, other expenses here is completely software. So I get 100% of that back, and then wages, I can get 100% of this back. What we're going to do, and now I'll set up a formula down here that we'll actually go through and calculate, and we'll say the R&D percentage is this, and then we'll have a payment date here. So we'll go payment date. Or payment month here. And basically what it's going to do, it's going to have a look through the model and have a look what the expenditure was during the last financial year, and then pay you back that cash rebate at the end. So if we put that month A, now what I'm going to build out down here, and I'll just build it in R&D tax. I'll just build it in our cash flow. So what we're going to have is the R&D calc that will run through. And it'll apply, it will just go some product. Lock that. That, and then times this by what our R&D percentage is up here. So this is just going to go through and look, and if we've got 100% there, what we're looking at is we're just going to go 9 times whatever our R&D percentage is there to arrive at that 3.195, and that's going to tell the business how much cash you can expect to get out. And then obviously, because we're in expense, we want to reverse that because now it's an asset to the business. And then much like our tax, so this is going to build up through time as an R&D item. It's a bit of it's an asset to the business because I guess you're going to recover it. So you almost what you do, and what I generally do when I'm running up these models is we'll have another line in our revenue item, and it'll be our R&D rebate. And generally you just run it so the year, whenever you get it paid out, so our payment date will be, and I'm just going to use some product to sort of run this. So I'm going to say, I'm going to run it and I'm going to times it by, what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the year and I'm going to go, if that, we're just going to run the entire array here equals whatever the year is we're currently looking at -1. So we're going to look at what last year was. We're going to pull out what the applicable expenditure was during that year. And we're just going to put an if statement here saying if the month is equals to this. We're just going to go through and run through. So what I've done here, Matthew, is I've set up a little formula just to run what this is going to do. And I'll just lock down all our cells so we're not jumping around when we go and pull it. It's going to look through. I just want to make sure I get it all picked up correctly. So now I should be able to run this to August this year. Should be able to look at that. And then I should be able to pull that if that equals to that. So just have a look. But what I'm effectively just doing here is I'm setting up so it's going to pull what our R&D rebate is. It's going to sum up, or we'll just do it a lot quicker. We'll just do it instead. I do it as sum product, so I'll run the entire formula in one. But we'll just go with sum if. Criteria. Oh, and see, we've run it there. So what it's going through and doing that -1. This guy. And then we're going to sum up what we've calculated already down here. So I'll run it as sum product because it's a lot easier just to run the whole thing through there. But what we've done is we've pulled out, and there we go. So now we've got it set up running right. So what it's doing here is it's going to pull out, it's going to look at, so we've already applied that 43.5% to whatever we put in here as 100%. And I'll show you why I put it as percentages in here rather than sort of a toggle on and off switch. But now it will go through and have a look at how much R&D we're actually expecting to get back. Put that as a revenue item. And now we're going to get that back through the model when it calculates out. But I've set this up because generally what you sort of find in a lot of businesses is they'll go through and they'll say, yeah, but only 50% of my wages are applicable because I've got a CEO and, you know, I've got a lawyer and a general counsel, and they're taking care of the corporate side of the business and raising the capital we need. So we actually only have 50% of our staff going through and running. And so that's going to apply that percentage and then kick that back out there. So then we've got our R&D tax line. So I guess these are very easy things to set up and then build and bolt onto your model. Once you get there and you start thinking about the intricate things that you want to pull out for your cash flow items. And then the other way to actually run this is I would set this up below the line and pull it through as a separate cash item down here, just so you can see the impact of the R&D tax calculation on there.
Fantastic. Adam, thank you so much for showing us this how to build a model in such a short space of time. We'll post the final time in the video and see where we got to, but I think this is certainly a lot more of a comprehensive model than what we ended up intending to build. So it was a brilliant, I think a brilliant display on how you can build a model pretty quickly, and a great display on how you can build a model using some of these new Excel dynamic array formulas. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
And if you're watching, post your comments on what other challenges you'd like Adam to do in the chat, and then we'll do that in the next video.
Yeah. Put any Excel problem you face, and we'll get on and we'll try and solve it in 20 minutes or less.